In a dramatic and defiant televised address from the Kremlin, Russian President Vladimir Putin unequivocally rejected what he termed an arrogant and counterproductive ultimatum from the United States. The speech, broadcast across all Russian state media channels, served as a direct and unyielding response to President Donald Trump's recent demand for an immediate cessation of hostilities and the commencement of peace negotiations in Ukraine. Rather than signaling a move toward de-escalation, President Putin's address was a forceful reaffirmation of Russia's military objective. He declared that the special military operation would continue until all its goals were met, and that no foreign power would dictate the terms of Russia's security or its relationship with what he described as historically Russian lands. He characterized the American president's demand as a blatant attempt to save the collapsing Kyiv regime from its inevitable defeat and to impose a unipolar world order. Almost immediately following the conclusion of his speech, air raid sirens blared across the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, heralding the beginning of one of the most extensive and brutal aerial assaults the city has witnessed since the war's outset. This coordinated military action was a clear and violent punctuation to President Putin's words, a message of brute force intended to demonstrate Russia's resolve and its complete dismissal of American pressure. The Russian leader's speech was laden with historical references and accusations against the West. He argued that the United States and its allies had spent years ignoring Russia's legitimate security concerns, methodically expanding NATO eastward and fostering an anti-Russian sentiment in Ukraine. He asserted that President Trump's ultimatum was merely the latest chapter in this long history of American interference. They believe they have the right to issue orders to other sovereign nations. President Putin stated, looking directly into the camera, they believe their demands, backed by threats of economic punishment, should be met without question. Russia will never bow to such blackmail. We are a great power with a 1,000-year history, and we will decide our own destiny. He praised the performance of the Russian military, specifically citing the recent capture of Chasiv as proof of their strength and the correctness of their strategy. He concluded his address by appealing to Russian patriotism, stating that the nation was united in its support for the armed force and that any attempt to intimidate Russia from the outside would only strengthen its people's will to achieve victory. The speech was carefully crafted to project an image of unwavering strength and to frame the conflict not as a war of aggression, but as a defensive struggle for Russia's very existence against a hostile Western bloc. The subsequent attack on Kyiv was executed with a terrifying scale and precision. Ukrainian Air Force officials reported multiple waves of missiles and drones launched from land, sea, and air. The assault began with a massive swarm of Shahid-type loitering munition, a tactic designed to overwhelm and deplete Ukrainian air defense. These slow-moving drones were followed by waves of faster and more powerful projectiles. Russian Tu-95 strategic bombers flying deep within Russian airspace launched dozens of Kh-101 and Kh-555 air-launched cruise missiles. Simultaneously, caliber cruise missiles were fired from Russian naval vessels in the Black Sea. The most alarming component of the attack was the confirmed use of multiple hypersonic missiles. Ukrainian authorities reported impact from both the air-launched Kinzhal missile and the sea-launched Zircon hypersonic cruise missile, a weapon that is exceptionally difficult to intercept due to its extreme speed and maneuverability. This combination of different weapon systems launched from multiple vectors represented a highly sophisticated and coordinated strike package designed to saturate and penetrate Kyiv's multi-layered air defense network. The Russian Ministry of Defense claimed that the strikes were aimed exclusively at military infrastructure and facilities related to Ukraine's defense industry. The official statement listed targets such as command and control center belonging to the Ukrainian Armed Force, intelligence headquarters, and workshop involved in the assembly and repair of military hardware. They specifically mentioned strikes against the Atom defense plant in Kyiv's Chasiv district and energy infrastructure facilities that provide power to military installation. Moscow's narrative was one of surgical precision, arguing that the strike were a legitimate response to Ukraine's continued attacks on Russian territory and were intended to degrade Kyiv's ability to wage war. However, the reality on the ground in the Ukrainian capital told a vastly different and more tragic story. While some military and infrastructure targets were hit, the sheer volume of incoming ordnance resulted in widespread collateral damage and numerous civilian casualties. Reports from Kyiv's mayor and emergency services painted a picture of chaos and destruction. In the densely populated Solomyansky district, the wreckage of an intercepted missile fell onto a large apartment building, causing a section of it to collapse and starting a massive fire. Rescue workers, braving the danger of secondary explosion, desperately searched through the rubble for survivors. In the historic Podil district, several civilian buildings were damaged, and a busy intersection was struck, leaving behind a crater and a burnout husk of cars. The Holosivsky district also reported multiple impacts, with damage to residential areas and a large park. The attacks were not confined to the city center. Power substations on the outskirts of Kyiv were heavily damaged, leading to widespread power outage and disruptions to the water supply in several neighborhoods. The city's emergency service was stretched to their absolute limit. The response from the Trump administration was swift and angry, reflecting the president's fury at having his public ultimatum so brazenly defied. On his Truth Social platform, President Trump posted a series of messages condemning the attack. Vladimir Putin's barbaric missile strike on the innocent people of Kyiv is a disgrace to humanity. One post read, "He chose death and destruction over a chance for peace. This will not be forgotten." However, in a subsequent post, he also directed his anger toward European allies. Our European partners, who are much more affected by this war, need to do more. They talk a big game but are slow to pay their fair share for defense. America cannot be the world's policeman. This dual messaging was characteristic of the administration's approach, combining condemnation of Russian aggression with a strong undercurrent of America first, isolationism, and criticism of traditional allies. Secretary of State Marco Rubio held an emergency press conference at the State Department. His tone was more measured but equally firm. Russia has made its choice clear, Secretary Rubio stated, by rejecting a direct appeal for peace and launching a terror campaign against a capital city. Mr. Putin has chosen the path of a pariah. The United States condemns this horrific attack in the strongest possible term. We are in immediate consultation with our partner and will be announcing a series of severe and punitive economic measures in the coming days. These will be sanctions of a magnitude not yet seen. He did not elaborate on the specific nature of these sanctions, but emphasized that they would target Russia's ability to finance and sustain its war machine. He also announced that he would be speaking with Ukrainian leaders to reaffirm American support for their sovereignty. From the Pentagon, Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth provided a sober military assessment of the Russian strike. Last night, integrated air and missile attack on Kyiv was a significant escalation in terms of its scale and complexity, he said in a statement. Initial analysis confirmed the use of a broad mix of subsonic cruise missile, ballistic missiles, and for the first time in such numbers, hypersonic weapons. This was a deliberate demonstration of force intended to overwhelm air defense and inflict maximum damage. It underscores the serious threat Russia continues to pose. He noted that while Ukrainian air defense had managed to intercept a portion of the incoming projectiles, the sheer volume made a perfect defense impossible. He reaffirmed the U.S. commitment to providing Ukraine with the tools it needs to defend itself, but did not announce any immediate new transfer of air defense systems, aligning with the administration's broader policy of pushing allies to take the lead. The intelligence community's perspective was articulated through a rare public statement from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. The statement suggested the Russian attack was not a spontaneous reaction, but a pre-planned contingency. The timing and scale of the strike indicate that the Russian military had a response package ready to implement in the event of what it perceived as an unacceptable ultimatum from the West. The statement read, "This action was likely designed to serve multiple purposes: project strength domestically to deter any further perceived interference from the United States, and to attempt to psychologically break the will of the Ukrainian people and their leadership. It is not a brutal but calculated move within the Kremlin strategic framework. This analysis provides a chilling insight into the cold logic behind the Night of Terror in Kyiv. The international community reacted with outrage and horror. Leaders across Europe issued strong condemnations, with many calling for an emergency session of the United Nations Security Council. The British Prime Minister called the attack a new low in Putin's campaign of cruelty, while the German Chancellor described it as an act of state terrorism. There were renewed and urgent calls for the immediate delivery of more air defense systems to Ukraine, particularly Patriot and SAMP-T batteries. The attack served as a brutal reminder to European nations of the stakes involved in the conflict and the reality that Russian aggression was not abating but rather intensifying. The deliberate targeting of a major European capital in direct defiance of a U.S. presidential demand sent a shockwave through the continent, raising fresh fears about President Putin's ultimate intentions and the potential for a wider, more dangerous conflict. The chasm between Moscow and the West now appears wider and more difficult to bridge than ever before, with the smoke still rising over the battered city of Kyiv. Many of my listeners, like 70%, have subscribed to my YouTube channel. And so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed. And that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to World Global Conflict, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first ones on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me. Help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.